to my channel and welcome back to part 2 of my series that I am doing. Scooch over. Okay, so in the last video I was sharing about how EDS and HSD may have been affecting me in my younger years, and now we are continuing on to the portion of my life when it really became prevalent that I was struggling with a chronic illness. So we left off in the last video of just starting to enter into my adult years, so from age 17. This is when I was active in dance. I had gotten my first job and I was starting to I would start working at the Bible camp that I went to as a teenager. Yeah, so I was living a very active lifestyle. I was dancing. I remember it was always on a Monday, and it was like 4 or 5 hours straight on a Monday. I would do dance for 4 to 5 hours straight, and then the rest of the week I was working full-time as a cashier, and so that was a lot of being on my feet, standing, blah blah blah, for a long period of time. And this is when my knee pain was getting really, really bad. And so as a cashier, I often was very restless when I had to stand, but they have like this, it's like a resting bar that they have underneath the counter that you can't see, so that whoever's standing there can like put their foot up or something or change positions as needed. But as a 17-year-old who had really, really bad knee pain, like it often interrupted my sleep. I often had to wear braces to work because I couldn't stand without pain. I couldn't do any sport or activity without pain, and so I usually had to use braces or tape for both of my knees. Fast forward, age 18, I started going to Bible college, and then I was actively working at the Bible camp that had captured my heart as a teenager. And so that job was so active, and I started off as a creative arts leader, but throughout my time there, I became the dance leader, and then just with it being a Bible camp, you're kind of involved in like all of the games that would get played, all of the sports and everything like that. This is where a lot of my injuries started. Still being a dancer, I had a few dance injuries in there. I actually had quite a few soccer injuries. I think both of them happened at the Bible college, or no, at the Bible camp in between age 18 and age like 22, I think. So one of them was a toe injury. I had sprained my toe at one point playing soccer because I accidentally missed the ball, and I was playing barefooted and I kicked someone's shin, and so I sprained my toe really badly. And another one was also a sprain, but it was like a hyperextending injury. So I had been playing soccer and I had intercepted this dude, and he lost his balance, and so I was like behind him, and so he started falling backwards, and I like reached my arm out behind me to stabilize myself, except my arm ended up like this behind me. I don't know if you saw that, but it was like across my body, but behind me, so like this. And so I full on fell on my arm behind me. Sorry, reposition. I full on fell on my arm behind me with this guy's full body weight on me as well, and my elbows, being hypermobile already, just kind of like went even more so, basically. And so that was an elbow sprain. I had to wear tape for about a week, 2 weeks, something like that. So there were those, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Basically, when I would get injured, unlike a normal person who would maybe deal with the injury for like a week, 2 weeks, whatever, I would deal with the injury for like way longer and they would resurface. And so every summer, whatever injuries I had from the previous summer would become a problem in the current summer. So I went from just being like, I went from only needing knee braces to then needing like ankle braces and then having really bad plantar fasciitis. So I needed to wear like foot tape all the time because of my plantar fasciitis. And so I would be wearing like two knee braces, 2 ankle braces. I would have like toes taped and I would have like the bottoms of my feet taped. And that was like most of the time, but especially if I was playing any sports, then all of that gear was on. And so that was another sign to me that something wasn't normal, because this joint pain was so severe that it was affecting my sleep, it was affecting my ability to do activities, and it just wasn't normal. Like, it's not normal to add an injury a couple injuries every year and for them to never go away. And so that really alerted me to the fact that something was wrong. And so I was really digging into that joint pain at that time. So I was seeing specialists and orthopedic surgeons, and who else did I see? I saw all kinds of people, and they would just be like, you're fine, just do some physio, it'll go away. Never went away. And eventually it got to a point where I could no longer play sports. When I realized this was when I was in my 3rd year of Bible college, and I had a artistic project to present, and I had chosen to choreograph a dance. And as I'm trying to choreograph this dance, all of my injuries were flaring. And so I was braced and taped from like hands, elbows, shoulders to my feet. And that's when I knew that I could no longer do sports, do activities, or anything like that. And so I had to fully quit any sports or activities, which was really hard for me with my past of being a very athletic person and just being a person who loves games and loves interacting with people through activity. It was hard to now be the one sitting on the sidelines watching people play the games that I wanted to play. Also during this time was when I had a lot of stomach issues, and this is when we found out that I had a lot of food intolerances, and so I had lost a ton of weight throughout college just from having food intolerances and my body not absorbing nutrients properly. So just out of college, I had to cut out gluten, lactose. Well, I had cut out lactose in college because it was that bad, and then we ended up cutting out corn, and then just this last year I cut out pork. But on top of those intolerances, I was still always feeling sick after meals, to the point sometimes where I'm like in the bathroom trying not to throw up and just praying that I can make it to whatever skill I was supposed to be teaching in 30 minutes. And also having really bad flare-ups where it would make me miss work or whatever in general, just because I was just so sick. And I knew that that was not normal. And during this time I was also diagnosed with endometriosis, and so I had endometriosis pain going on top of all of that as well. And this is kind of where, around this time is when I learned about EDS, and I watched someone's video and they had very severe symptoms. So they had gastroparesis, they had POTS, they had severe joint dislocations, and I was like, oh wow, that really sucks. I don't think I would ever have that, but also in the back of my head thinking, is it possible though? And then as my symptoms continued to progress, it became more likely, and I was like, oh wow, I think I might have EDS. And this is where I had to make a choice. Am I going to bring this up to my doctors, or am I just gonna wait it out and see if they figure it out? And in my experience, doctors really like to give me specifically normal test results, or like they love to see that my test results are normal, because that means that they can just ship me off and everything is fine. But that's the thing, is that I wasn't fine. Just whatever test they ran was normal, and it wasn't finding the issues that I was dealing with. And so that's when I did start bringing up EDS with the specialists and providers that I was seeing. And for them, especially in my area, it's not well known. And so when my doctor asked me, what do you think this could be? I said, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And he was like, what's that? And I was like, are you serious right now? And so then I had to spell it for him. I had to explain what it was. And he was like, you don't have that. And I'm like, how do you know though? He's like, yeah, I guess. And I saw a different specialist where he was only familiar with severe cases. And so he basically, I said, I've been wondering if maybe I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and he gave my ankle a tug, and he's like, well, it didn't dislocate, so you don't have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I was like, that's not how this goes. And so I have been on a diagnostic Odyssey since then. Since then, I brought it up to most of my providers, and it's like, I think it's in my chart somewhere now that we're working on an Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnosis. And with that, in my area, what the doctors know to do is they're like, oh, we'll refer you to what the doctors know to do in my area when they hear Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is they're like, oh, well, you should see genetics. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. In my area, genetics will only see you if you're showing signs of one of the other types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. If you're showing signs of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, they decline your referral. And so I have had 5 referrals sent and declined because my case looks like a hypermobile type. And so I have had my doctor go over the criteria with me, but because he's not super familiar with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, he ended up getting hung up on some of the points in like criteria B, like, you know, when it talks about like aortic dilation and different like heart valve issues. When my echo came back clear, he's like, oh, you don't have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome because your heart stuff came back clear. Meanwhile, I had passed the Beighton score, I passed criteria A, I guess it was criteria A, in criteria A. Criteria B, my mom most likely has it because she shows a lot of signs of it as well. And I have other relatives that have signs of it, or they're working on their own diagnosis, but because they're secondary relatives, it doesn't count for criteria B. But I most likely have some first degree relatives that are showing signs of it. They just haven't gone into a diagnosis. And then criteria C, or like that, I think it's criteria C. I don't know. I think I need to look at it. But to me, not being a doctor, I can see that I passed. And so right now, what I'm working towards is finding a doctor in my area who is familiar with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and can look through the diagnostic criteria with me and actually fully diagnose me, which is really hard to do because my province, so the Ehlers-Danlos Society has been so incredibly helpful for so many people with resources and raising awareness and fundraisers and everything like that. And they have this feature on there where you can search like your country and then like narrow it down to like your state or your province to like find providers that know about EDS. And they don't even have my province listed on there. And so that makes it really difficult. So I've gone on to like different Facebook support groups to ask people who they've seen to get diagnosed and who they know in my province that knows anything about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because there is so few that actually know something. The people who are currently in charge of my care, who do I all see? So I have my primary care doctor who didn't even know how to spell it or say it, and so he really doesn't know much about it. He's been helpful in getting me specialists and referrals, but he hasn't been helpful in helping me get this diagnosis, because he would like to just say that it's fibromyalgia and let me go. And I know in my heart, and just like in, you know, when something just doesn't sit right with you, that diagnosis does not sit right with me. And considering that I technically pass the criteria for HEDS is also what really drives me to get my full diagnosis. But yeah, I have a primary care doctor. I currently work with a physio who works with other EDS patients as well, so that's been helpful for me. I see an osteopath who also works with other EDS patients, and that has also been very helpful. I work with a bioresonance provider who helps me with my endometriosis, and that's been helpful in that way. Who else do I see? I'm going to be seeing a GI doctor in June, and I'm also going to be seeing a dietitian in June as well. And other than that, the only other providers, I guess my cardiologist, he's heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and he's given me 3 referrals that all came back from genetics anyways. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in this journey, but I'm going to do another part yet to show you how this disease affects me on a daily basis, because when I really look back over my life, when I look at who I was and how I was as a kid and a teenager and like an early young adult, kind of when those first symptoms started showing up, I had a lot of energy, I had a lot of excitement for life, and I was really motivated, and I spent a lot of time like serving in church, serving at camp, serving at the college that I went to, and I was very extroverted and involved in things. Going from that kind of person to now being so sick that I'm not able to work outside of my home, and even working a job from home is difficult for me some days. Going from that to this has been a very difficult transition for me, and it's been really hard for me to swallow, and that's also why I'm fighting so hard to get my full diagnosis, because of how much it affects me and how much having an EDS diagnosis will affect the treatment of my other conditions. I have endometriosis, I have POTS, I have some sort of GI disorder that we don't know which one yet, but all of these things affect which treatment plans I'm able to do, and it affects my plans for the future. Like, there's a statistic out there that says people with EDS, if you plan on having kids, it's about a 50% chance of passing down EDS to your kids, and that's a really big percentage. And there's a chance that my kids, if they did get EDS, there's a chance that they would be affected way differently and way less than I am, but there's also a risk that they would be affected way more than I am. So some of the symptoms that maybe I'll go into this in the next video, but it affects everybody differently, and it will affect my decisions, and it just affects a lot of things, and that's why it's so important to me to get this diagnosis. And I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you're dealing with a slew of symptoms and doctors haven't been able to really piece together what's going on, maybe it might be worth looking into for you, whether the hypermobile spectrum disorder or EDS. That's how I got started, was I had all of these issues that just didn't work. And there's a quote that says, when you can't connect the issues, think connective tissues. And that's really what has driven my journey to diagnosis. But anyways, we're gonna close out this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel, really helps people find me because I am a small YouTuber. And it really helps raise awareness for this disease, for people to watch it. Yeah, I hope you'll stick around for my journey by subscribing. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye!